Right, so welcome to the PropTechBuzz Smart Buildings Innovation podcast. Today I have with me Xander van Baarsen from Rhino. Xander, would you be able to give yourself an introduction to all the viewers?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Moses, for having me. Very excited. I'm Xander. I'm commercially responsible for the growth of Rhino, and we are a utility data aggregator. We'll dive into the specifics over the course of this conversation, but I've been in PropTech for a bigger part of my career, and I'm with Rhino since a year. Uh, and yeah, we're making great steps.
Am I right in saying that you helped the expansion from in the Europe scene with Rhino?
Yep. Well, you can say internationally anything. So the Rhino was originally founded, and our HQ is still based in Poland. We employ approximately 15 to 20 people in Poland, and last year I opened the Amsterdam office, and from Amsterdam we'll service the rest of the world.
So as you can see,
Yeah.
smart buildings are going up in fashion, so is Rhino. Am I right in saying that then?
Yes. Yeah, you might say that. Yeah.
Perfect. And I do really appreciate you making the time to get on the interview with us and tell us more about Rhino. So we're going to start with the first question, which is how is smart buildings industry involved and what energy efficiency and sustainability trends are shaping the industry?
Yeah, well, so the smart building industry has evolved from, I guess, what you can call basic automation, and terminology like IoT to what it is right now, right? It's a next level of being smart. Everything is connected. Everything that's not connected yet needs to be connected, and there's a quite some awareness in the market that connectivity is key. Um, and yeah, as a result, or let's say as a follow-up of that connectivity, my assumption is that in the upcoming years, AI will play a big part in building automation, right? We want to be able to scale as the building environment will only grow in over the next decades. And in terms of sustainability, there are a few trends. First of all, at least for utilities, the I guess the Ukraine-Russian war sort of gave an extra push, right, to the prices on a global scale, resulting in a lot of awareness and the need for cost cutting. Now, the prices are not that high anymore. At least the steep growth is out, but we still have that climate thing to fix. And over, I guess, the globe, you see various sets of regulations in place demanding either a certain level of sustainability from a building or at the very minimum reporting on the, I guess, the consumption of a building, right? The added sum of your gas and water and electricity consumption is basically the carbon footprint of your building. Now, if you're an investment manager, the carbon footprint of your building is something that you need to report on, whether it's your ESG reporting or your SFDR, your CSDR. It all starts with the utility data, and that's sort of our position in the ecosystem, right? So you on the bottom level, you got your building, the bricks, basically, and on the top level, you got the front end of the performance of that building, being a platform, a software, dashboard, etc. But the connection between those, it still happens manually in a lot of cases, and that's sort of our link, right? We want to bridge that data gap between the front end and the actual bricks and stones.
And with bridging that data, how does AI come into that?
Hmm. Well, AI can help with maintenance, predictive maintenance, detecting anomalies, helping with forecasting on the performance of the building. Yeah.
So it has a lot of potential in terms of improving buildings as a whole. I did want to ask a question because you brought up a big global event like the Ukraine-Russia war. The global event such as the pandemic, how did that affect the market? Was that a positive or was that a negative overall?
Well, on a bigger scale, I don't think it had any effect at all. But at the moment in time, of course, there was a lot of speculation on, I guess, habit changes, right? We won't go back to the office, and we need different houses because we work more from home. And it's still a little bit true, but it's not really what was predicted back then. You see a big flow back to the office again. And maybe in some cases, the function of a building can change a little bit. It needs to be more adaptable, right? We cannot build a office, no, sorry, we cannot build a building only to be an office for the remainder of its life because the embedded carbon of building a building doesn't really validate only using it for an office if there's no need for an office anymore. So I guess as a developer or landlord, you need to be able to be agile and change with the market.
So I'd like to ask then, what are the key benefits and challenges of integrating IoT and AI in smart buildings?
Cost reduction, compliance, and maintenance. Yeah.
So going into maintenance a bit more, what are examples of that?
Well, we've got customers using our alarms and notifications for leak detection for gas and for water, for instance. We've got customers. We had this case where a big student apartment block. I think it was 195, approximately 200 student apartments. They were heated by a central system in the basement. The central system went down, and then the backup generator started heating, and nobody complained because the climate stayed exactly the same. And the janitor really doesn't come down to the basement that often. So without having your connectivity in place and your real-time data in place, nobody would have noticed. Luckily, they had our system in place, and then an alarm was sent out. Hey, there's a very high kilowatt hour consumption happening in the basement right now. Please go check. And then our partner went there and they noticed what was wrong and they fixed it. They had it fixed by the janitor within, I think, 48 to 27 hours it was fixed. Would they not have fixed it this fast, by the end of the year, the electricity bill would have gone up with 36K over the remainder of this year. So it sort of they had a return on their investment for the whole complete portfolio just because the one alarm. And of course, this is an anomaly, but there's always something, right? And you need your data in place, you need your alarms and notifications in place. Otherwise, you won't notice.
So that's hitting the points of maintenance and reduced costs as well. So
Correct.
there was another point of conservation. I was looking into that a little bit, and I just wanted a bit of your point of view on how exactly the integration of IoT and AIs like increasing resource conservation.
Um, can you explain that question a little bit?
So with a lot of buildings, like you said, there's carbon emissions mainly because they've been built a while ago. They have, for example, it's these like sorry, I'm trying to think of there's cement, there's all these building the materials that go
Embedded
in.
carbon.
Yeah. So
Yep.
what I would say is like would these allow like reduction in the future when we're looking at new buildings, having IoT in place, would that allow like for a reduction in the amount of resources being used specifically for we'd be able to manage it better so the carbon emissions goes down? Would that be along the right way or along the right line of saying resource conservation? That's more the question I'm
Yeah,
asking.
you could say that. You could say that. The thing is, I think there's a big role for technology in bringing down the carbon emissions also during the development and construction of new buildings. That's not specifically let's say the scope where
Yeah.
Rhino can help. Nevertheless, there will be a very big role for technology in bringing down the embedded carbon during production and construction. The thing is, in So currently we have, let's say, X amount of square meters or square feet of building area over the world, right? The whole globe. And in the next 40 years, that amount will be doubled compared to now.
Yeah.
So every month for the next 40 years, a city the size of New York will be added to the globe. That means that by the time it's 2060, 50% will be new, 50% will be old. So for the new buildings, we definitely need some technology in place to bring down the carbon footprint, the embedded carbon during production and construction. Simultaneously, the other half of buildings already exist today, right? And it will be a waste of energy, pun intended, if we won't reuse those buildings. They're already here. They already had their carbon footprint, right? It's embedded. So we need to be versatile, right? Coming back to my previous point. We cannot just break it down and say, hey, we've got a new technology. So now, well, let's build a new building on the same place with the new technology and it's better. It's not, because we still have the carbon debt that building construction took.
So like you just said,
and that's why yeah.
So it's not tearing down the old, bringing up the new. It's improving the old, so then it gets to the level of the new. That's what we're looking at.
It's both. Yeah, correct. Yeah.
So going specifically to Rhino, then, what makes Rhino different as a PropTech to all the other PropTechs in the same space?
Most of our competitors are either hardware manufacturers or platform software only, and we provide a combination. We can make hardware and software only for the, let's say, unexperienced person. We could look like a competitor to those platforms, or we could look like a competitor to those hardware manufacturers. But we're not a smart metering company, nor are we a platform only SaaS provider, right? We can remote access data through available APIs. We can go into the asset physically and position our hardware there. It's not smart meters. We communicate with the existing meters. We just go in there, pull the data from the existing hardware. So there's no retrofit needed. It comes with a relatively low capex, and then we extract the data. And then we normalize it, we centralize it, and we send it either to our platform or somebody else's platform. Really doesn't matter. Our position in the ecosystem is the data aggregation part.
Okay. So with saying that, then the data aggregation, is that saying there's not exactly similar PropTechs in the same space doing what you're doing? Because I know that you hit all asset classes and all the buildings and you for data aggregation, but you'd say there's no one exactly doing what you're doing. That's one of your unique selling points. Is that what I'd say? Would I be right in saying that?
We're not the only one in the world. Obviously, there are other providers as well, but it does make us unique that we are able to physically go into the building, that we are able to remote read the main meter if it's very regional. It's a very regional thing. So not every country provides those remote APIs, but we can do both. And having that combination basically makes us very versatile. So indeed, it doesn't matter the asset class. It doesn't matter how old the building is or where it's geographically located, because our function or our role is to aggregate the data. That's what we focus on.
Yeah. So how does Rhino help? How does Rhino as a company actively reduce environmental impacts and achieve sustainability goals?
Most of our customers are, after the first few months, are able to cut down on their consumption by 30%. So as mentioned, we very much focus on the consumption or the production, by the way, of utilities, and we provide that data. But being able to get that real-time data, all of our customers instantly understand how they can take action, right? In the B2B world, it's different than we as consumers. As consumers, we pay what we use. But in the B2B world, consuming utilities, you pay for the bandwidth, especially with the electricity, you pay for the bandwidth that's needed. So the bandwidth that the utility provider needs to reserve on their network, that's your peak. So the peak of what you need to use, that's what they need to reserve for you. So if you bring down your consumption, but the peak stays the same, your utility bill will approximately stay the same as well. So you need to have that real-time data, understand, hey, that's my peak, and then zoom into the peak. Why is that peak happening? And then you can break it down, and then you can cut down the peaks, and that's where the cost reduction and the consumption reduction comes from.
So you're allowing all the other businesses that are taking up your service to improve their data aggregation and then thus reducing their whatever environmental impact they'd have. Is that a good way of saying it as well? Okay.
Yep, yep. And in a lot of cases, our API feeds other dashboards, right? ESG dashboards or certifications, building certification systems or tenant experience platforms. Yeah.
So you're providing the knowledge, the service, and extra experience or advice that they would need to reduce any to hit their sustainability goals as well as yours.
Correct. Yep.
I mean, that sounds like something that everybody needs to take up.
That's what I
So,
say.
how does Rhino adapt its solutions to the unique needs of logistics, offices, retail businesses in the utility consumption management? Because as we know, there's specific to offices, like we said, that it would be a very the utility management and data aggregation would be different to homes and retail.
Yep. But in the end, it's all the same data. It's all the same meters. It's all the same either need for a retrofit or existing, right? In the end, it's commercial and it's not a consumer. So we don't do any consumer business, but we do residential. So as long as it's big apartment complexes and being able, slightly referring to my previous point, because we've got a mix of physically going into an asset with hardware or software only and pulling the remote data, because we can offer both, we can adapt to any asset class. So just to give an example, in the Netherlands, the remote reading is pretty sophisticated. And within residential, also big apartment complexes and student housing, each front door is a main meter. So there's no hardware needed. We can pull the data because it's a main meter. But if you would compare that to an office space or a warehouse, there's a main meter, and if there's multi-tenants in that asset, there are not multiple main meters, so there's sub-metering in place, and then the remote reading is not sufficiently enough anymore. So you need to go in physically. Being able to have that mix of hardware and software helps us adapt to the asset class.
Okay. So you're like you've just said, it's commercial. So the bigger properties, the bigger buildings is what you guys do. Is there a reason that it's not the small single family residential homes and it's the big multi-family complexes?
Yeah, well, in the single family homes, most countries, at least in Western Europe, already offer some form of a smart meter, right? We can help there, but our system is not built for that. Our system is go to expand cross border, to expand cross asset class, and to help institutional investors that operate internationally to fill in those blanks, those data gaps in their portfolio.
This is a question that we've kind of touched upon, which is like, what is the ROI for the companies that integrate Rhino technology for energy saving and reduced emissions? You've obviously said that they're reducing by around 30% their emissions, and you said that you also advise them. Is there anything else you'd add on to that as well? Like you
Yeah,
advise.
well, it 30% correct, and it depends very much on the asset class, right? You can imagine that a warehouse is a very different, let's say, consumption pattern than an office space has, or an apartment building with student houses in there. But by average, 30%, correct? Yeah.
So that's the main obviously that's a very amazing target to be providing for other businesses. So that's the main. So I'm trying to get the word actually. Yes, that's the main.
ROI. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the main ROI that
Yep.
anybody using your technology gets. So going on from that, how does Rhino facilitate data sharing and collaboration among stakeholders for sustainability objectives? Because obviously we know that it's not just the business that is affected. It's everybody who comes in around the business and the buildings. So how do they facilitate data sharing for all the other people that aren't also involved in that specific building?
Yeah, that's a good question. There are a lot of stakeholders that need this type of data, and even within the ecosystem, I get conversations on this on a weekly, almost daily basis. So looking at our own customers, we've got the institutional investor using our data. We've got the asset manager or the operator needing our data as well. They need to compare the different assets that they manage for their investors. And then we've got facility management as well. Now, in a lot of cases, if we are not present, by the way, sometimes if we are present as well, all these different users use their own system, right? So the facility manager needs to get alarms or notifications, has some sensors on the water infrastructure. And the HQ needs to do their ESG reporting, and they pull the data from their, I guess, yearly overview from the invoices. And then we've got the operators. They need their monthly data because they need to be able to compare one month to the other. Now, in theory, these could be 3 or 4 different systems. In practice, what we help with is that it can be one system, right? Why would you have 5 gateways in the fuse box? We can all bundle that together. And because of our API, we can feed for the investment manager, we can feed their ESG dashboarding or their own data lake. And then for the facility manager, we got our alarms and notifications. But so it needs to be, and we've got all those user login permissions and layers. And so our system is completely built for that. But the goal here is it needs to be a shared effort and not a split effort, right? Because in the end, everybody needs approximately the same data, maybe a different set. Sometimes some stakeholder needs it once per month or once per year, and the other one needs it in real time. Because we are aggregating the data nonetheless. For us, it really doesn't matter if we pull once per month or once per 15 minutes. We do it anyways. So if you got one system in place and all stakeholders are aligned on what are the goals and what do we need, what do I need to fix for my role, then we can help with that, and we can make sure that the API or the platform or the login credentials go to that stakeholder in the form that the stakeholder needs to consume this type of data.
So
shared effort, not a split effort.
going back to
It's cheaper as well.
Going back to that shared effort point, why would you say, what is the importance of all stakeholders being able to access the data, not just looking at the businesses, the facility managers, the property managers, for, and so on and so forth, looking at just the general public? What's the importance of this data being collected in terms of in the general public? Why would that be an important thing?
Well, we've got our climate goals, right? We want to bring down our carbon footprint. So this is the carbon footprint. 40% of the carbon emissions on the global scale come from buildings. In residential areas, urban areas, I mean, like New York and Tokyo, this number goes up to 80%. So coming back, 40% of carbon emissions come from buildings. We just concluded that in the next 40 years, the number of buildings on the globe, or the number of square meters, building square meters on the globe will double. And simultaneously, we all said that we want to cut down our greenhouse gases by 2030 by, what is it, 30 or 40%, and then another 95% by 2060, 2050. How the hell are we going to do this without the data, right? It's a no-brainer. You need to start somewhere, and you need to start with what the end goal is, right? If the current regulations ask for data once per month or once per year, but we already know that the new set of regulations being rolled out in a couple of years ask for real-time data, it's all very regional. But everywhere you see very comparable things, right? In the Netherlands, you need to have energy label C for open space. And I know in the UK they got similar things for office space and residential. And then in New York, you got the regulations in place to be able to sub-meter lights. Sub-meter lights for residential and office space. Well, this is almost everything that you've got in New York. So on a global scale, you see the same type of sets of regulations being rolled out, and they all start with the same thing: data.
So, so in a nutshell, it would be saying that to hit our global target of reducing emissions, can I say that we have to integrate Rhino technologies? Is that the blanket statement that I'd say?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So on to our next question, which is how does Rhino support industry leaders in generating ESG reports and sustainability goals? I know we've talked about the sustainability goals quite a lot, but in terms of the ESG specifically, as we know, that's become a more it's become more important in terms of investors when looking to even for developers looking into a building, like they need to understand ESG, like they need to look at the ESG reports and everything like that. So how does Rhino support industry leaders when generating reports?
Yeah. So our API can feed ESG dashboards, and we already have a few integrations live for globally operating customers. Um, ESG is, of course, a broad
Yeah.
set of things to report on, and Rhino doesn't do anything with the S or the G. We don't even do the complete E, right? We don't monitor waste management, but the utilities, the electricity, the water, and the gas consumption is, if I might say so, the most important piece of the puzzle for the E. And we provide that data in real time. So any investment manager, any company investing in real estate that needs to report on the carbon footprint of their portfolio and needs to make their ESG reporting, our type of data is pretty key in that. Yeah.
So you mentioned that you mainly focus on the E and you do the most important parts of the E. In terms of the S and the G, which is the social and the governance, what would you say would be the ideal solution for that, the ideal technology to combat that part of the ESG?
Well, I don't have a complete answer to that because it's not my, let's say, specialty. But within the yes, there are a lot of HR platforms out there that can help generate data, right, on employee satisfaction and on sick leave and that type of data. And being able to process APIs from set platforms can help automate that data as well. The G, I'm not sure if you can automate that, but if you got your E and your S in place, the G will follow out of that.
Yeah. Just
Yeah.
thought I'd throw that question out to see whether there is any potential business ideas you've got for people looking to go into that space specifically for PropTech.
Of
So
course, but there are a lot of the ESG platforms out there that help with that. Huh? Look at a DeepKey or a Measurable. They've got a very sophisticated platform taking the E, the S, and the G into account.
So I wanted to move on to a very key, and I would say partially conflicting issue, which is data protection, because it's very important that people are able to access the data that they need. But then there's also a problem with data protection in terms of it not getting into the wrong hands or being used in the wrong way. So what would you say? How would you say? What are the measures that Rhino's platforms use in addressing this issue?
Yeah. So there are a few things in place. First of all, our gateway sends the data to our cloud over our own encrypted network. So there's a VPN-enabled SIM on our hardware on board. It directly sends it to the cloud. There's no firewall or local network needed. And then our cloud is hosted in AWS. So the complete AWS security suite applies to all of the data that we process, including encryption, key management, secure vault, access control through the roles. We've got quite a sophisticated system in place. Yeah.
So it's safe to say that the data is safe.
Yeah.
So this is the final question, which is what future innovations are Rhino working on to not just improve their technology as well, but also combat other issues in the utility management space?
I guess AI. AI is the most important thing that we will be working on in the upcoming years. It's already part of what we offer. but it can be more sophisticated, right? Better predictive maintenance, better forecasting, advanced analytics, new learning models, predictive maintenance, and of course, tighter integrations, both on the building side as well as the software side. We want to be versatile. We are hardware agnostic and we are platform agnostic, and we want to communicate with the whole ecosystem.
Yeah. This is a question that I wanted to get your general opinion on. Is obviously the prop tech market as a whole has seen a large growth and it's forecasted to continue to increase in the next coming years. What would you say how would you say that's going to improve your expansion? Would you say Rhino is looking to not just to go global, not just in Amsterdam, Poland? Because I know you're already a global platform, but where do you see your Rhino going in the future in terms of location wise?
Yeah, so we are currently expanding in Western Europe. We are originally from Eastern Europe, and within the logistics space in Eastern Europe, we're considered the industry standard. So that's I guess, something that we want to, some success that we want to copy in new regions. Western Europe, we're quite present in the coming months. The UK, we already have some buildings connected in the UK, but we will be growing there as well as the Nordics, and in 24 we'll make the jump to the US as well. And well, coming back to your question on the market, research shows that in the upcoming, 10 to 20 years, the real estate market for ESG related assets under management will grow with approximately 13% year over year. So that's the building side, right? And then on the software side, the energy software management, SaaS only, that market will also grow with almost 13%, 12.5% year over year. So having that bricks and stones market grow to a 30 plus trillion market, and then have that software market grow to a 3+ billion market, we are that's key in the middle, right? Bridging that data gap between the buildings and software. And we won't be alone. I'm hoping for some healthy competition, but I'm expecting and something we are, well, I guess, working our asses off for, is that we can grow with those growths.
Competition does drive innovation, so we're hoping that people come and challenge you to improve your systems even more than they've already been improved. So in the future, like you said, a lot of growth. So we're hoping to see where that goes as well. Thank you so much for making time. I really appreciate the insight. Is there anything else you'd like to say as a final point in terms of Rhino?
I guess that's it. But of course, go to Rhino.energy if you want to learn more. Yeah.
Thank you so much.